A millennial is about to close an app. The order has already gone through. The confirmation number is on the screen. The delivery window looks normal. Nothing seems especially dramatic. Still, before closing it, they take a screenshot. Not because the screen is beautiful, not because this is a memory they are trying to preserve, not because they want to look back years from now and remember the afternoon they ordered a replacement phone charger, two groceries, and a bottle of laundry detergent. They take the screenshot because some part of them has learned that later, this screen might matter. Maybe the order will disappear. Maybe the delivery estimate will change. Maybe the customer service person will ask for proof. Maybe the app will insist that nothing went wrong, even though something very clearly did. So they save it. Then they move on. And this is one of the stranger habits of millennial adulthood. There are screenshots in the camera roll that are not photographs in any emotional sense. They are confirmation numbers, parking signs, receipts, customer service chats, text messages, addresses, concert tickets, appointment reminders, delivery windows, odd comments someone might delete. Something important enough to save, but not important enough to organize. And eventually, the camera roll becomes a strange archive of modern life, part memory box, part filing cabinet, part evidence locker. From the outside, this can look excessive. Why do millennials save so much? Why do they photograph ordinary meals? Why do they keep old messages? Why do they screenshot things instead of just trusting that they will be there later? The easy answer is vanity. Maybe millennials are obsessed with themselves. Maybe they cannot experience anything unless it becomes content. Maybe every coffee, sunset, outfit, inconvenience, and group chat has to become part of the record. And sometimes, sure, there is some truth there. Millennials did come of age during the rise of social media. They did learn to narrate parts of life as it was happening. They did live through the moment when private experience became something you could post, save, revisit, and perform. But that explanation misses something deeper because a lot of millennial documentation is not glamorous. It is not curated. It is not even interesting. No one is trying to build a personal brand out of a screenshot of a refund request. The habit is not only about memory, it is about proof. It is about protection. It is about living in a world where so much happens through systems, platforms, portals, apps, policies, messages, and disappearing interfaces that keeping a record starts to feel like common sense. For millennials, keep the receipt. Stop being a figure of speech. It became a way of moving through adulthood. Force 1. Millennials grew up during the shift from remembering life to saving life. For part of their childhood, memory still had limits. A birthday party might be documented by a few printed photos. A vacation might live in a photo album. A school year might be captured in a yearbook. A family event might be recorded on a camcorder that only came out when someone remembered to charge it. There were objects, photo envelopes, ticket stubs, handwritten notes, mixed CDs, printed pictures stuck to bedroom mirrors, boxes under beds filled with things that did not seem important until years later. But not everything was captured. That was normal. Moments happened, and then they became stories. They softened. They changed. They were remembered differently by different people. They lived in the mind more than in the record. Then the tools changed. Digital cameras made photos cheap. Camera phones made photos constant. Texting turned conversations into archives. Social media turned ordinary life into a timeline. Cloud storage made it feel like everything could be kept forever. Millennials were old enough to remember when documentation took effort, but young enough to adapt when documentation became automatic. That matters. Because they did not simply grow up with unlimited recording. They watched the limit disappear. At first, that felt exciting. You could take as many photos as you wanted. You could save a conversation. You could revisit a profile. You could find an old message. You could scroll backward into a version of yourself you had almost forgotten. The archive felt like abundance. More memory. More proof that something happened. More ways to hold on to people. Jokes, nights out, inside references, bad haircuts, old friendships, and the strange little details that used to vanish. But over time, something shifted. Once life could be saved, not saving, it started to feel like a choice. And sometimes, a mistake. If you forgot the name of a place, maybe you should have taken a picture. If someone denied what they said, maybe you should have saved the message. If a company changed the terms, maybe you should have captured the page before it changed. The ability to document quietly became the expectation to document, and that expectation followed millennials into adulthood. Force 2. Digital life made the past feel both permanent and unstable. This is the strange contradiction. On one hand, the internet remembers everything. An old photo can come back years later. A post you barely remember writing can still exist. A message can sit in a thread long after the relationship has ended. A profile from some earlier version of life can feel like a little museum exhibit of who you used to be. The past became searchable. Here is the date. Here is the message. Here is the photo. Here is the post. Here is what happened. That can be comforting, but it can also feel unsettling. Because digital records do not fade the way human memory fades. They can preserve things without context. A joke can outlive the friendship that made it make sense. An old opinion can outlive the person who has changed since then. A bad photo can survive with the confidence of a historical document. So millennials learned that the internet remembers. But they also learned that digital life can vanish. A platform changes. A link dies. A file disappears. A phone breaks. A message gets deleted. A post gets edited. An account gets locked. An app redesign hides the thing that used to be easy to find. So the past feels permanent and fragile at the same time. Everything might last forever, but the one thing you actually need may be gone tomorrow. That is where the screenshot becomes useful. It is not elegant. It is not organized. It is not a careful filing system. It is a quick little act of preservation before the system changes its mind. The screenshot says, "Let me hold this version. This page, this price, this message, this confirmation, this moment before it moves, disappears, updates, refreshes, or gets buried." And the more digital life becomes unstable, the more ordinary this habit starts to feel. Force 3. Adult life taught millennials that proof matters. This is where documentation becomes less about nostalgia and more about survival, because adulthood now comes with a remarkable amount of invisible paperwork. Not the kind that feels official and organized, the kind scattered across apps, inboxes, portals, chats, PDFs, screenshots, and accounts. You only remember exist when something goes wrong. A package says it was delivered, but it was not. A subscription renews after you thought you canceled. A company promises a refund, but the next person has no record of it. A landlord says, "You never reported the leak." A workplace request changes after the fact. A parking sign is confusing. A medical portal has instructions that may or may not still be there later. A customer service chat gives you an answer that sounds helpful right up until the app refreshes and the conversation disappears. After a few experiences like that, you learn the lesson. Get the confirmation number, save the email, take the screenshot. Do not close the chat window until the transcript arrives. Photograph the damaged package. Photograph the rental car. Photograph the parking sign. Keep the receipt longer than seems reasonable because the one time you throw it away will be the one time someone asks for it. This is not paranoia in the dramatic sense. It is a learned response to systems that often make the individual responsible for proving what happened. The company has the platform, the employer has the system, the landlord has the lease, the app has the terms, the institution has the portal, and the person has a screenshot. That is why screenshots became survival. They are small, ordinary attempts to balance a power difference. The screenshot cannot fix the system, but it can keep the system from pretending the thing never happened. Force 4. Social life became easier to prove than to explain. Documentation did not stay inside customer service and receipts. It moved into relationships too. Millennials came of age while social life was becoming written. Plans moved into texts, flirting moved into DMIS, friend groups moved into group chats, dating moved into apps, workplace tone moved into Slack messages and emails, family conflict moved into threads that could be reread at midnight by someone who really should have gone to sleep. And once social life becomes written, it becomes recordable. That changes the emotional texture of relationships. A weird message does not have to be described. It can be shown. A strange dating app exchange can be sent to 3 friends for interpretation. A passive aggressive work message can be saved. A family member can claim they never said something, and suddenly there it is, sitting in the thread. Sometimes this is funny, sometimes it is petty, sometimes it is protective, and sometimes it is the only way a person can keep their grip on reality when someone else is trying to rewrite it. That is the complicated part. Screenshots can make social life worse. They can turn conflict into evidence collection. They can make people perform for an invisible future audience. They can make private conversations feel less private because any message might become portable. But the habit did not come from nowhere. It came from a world where tone is easy to deny, context is easy to strip away, and messages can be edited, deleted, forwarded, or reframed. The screenshot becomes a witness, not always a fair witness, not always a complete witness, but a witness. And for a generation that lived more and more of its social life through screens, that mattered. Force 5. Documentation became a defense against instability. This is probably the emotional center. Millennials became adults in a world where many things felt less stable than they were supposed to feel. Jobs changed, prices changed, platforms changed, policies changed, housing changed, interfaces changed. Even the apps that were supposed to simplify life kept redesigning themselves into new little puzzles. You would finally learn where the button was, then the button moved. You would understand the policy, then the policy changed. You would know the price, then the price updated. You would trust that the record existed somewhere, then the portal became impossible to navigate. Documentation becomes a way to create a fixed point inside all of that motion. This was the price. This was the agreement. This was the message. This was the date. This was the delivery window. This was the version I was shown. In a stable world, maybe you do not need to save as much. You can trust that the system will remember correctly. You can trust that people will honor what they said. You can trust that the record exists somewhere and can be found when needed. But when systems feel unstable, opaque, or unaccountable, people start building their own archives. Not because the archive is beautiful, because the archive feels safer than trusting the system. That is also why this connects so closely to the millennial desire for a simpler life. When the larger world feels too big to manage, people start managing the smaller things they can: the room, the phone, the calendar, the inbox, the folder, the camera roll, the receipts. Documentation is a form of control, not complete control, not peace exactly, but a small reduction in helplessness. A way to say, I cannot control what happens next, but I can keep a record of what happened before. Force 6. But documenting everything changes how life feels. Here is the honest part. Documentation helps, but it also has a cost. Because once you start treating life as something that might need evidence later, it becomes harder to simply move through it. A concert becomes something to record. A meal becomes something to photograph. A vacation becomes something to archive. A conversation becomes something to preserve. A conflict becomes something to document. Even a normal errand can turn into a trail of confirmation screens, tracking numbers, receipts, and follow up emails. The record starts to sit between the person and the experience. And sometimes the record becomes heavier than the moment. You have the photos, but barely remember looking around. You have the screenshots, but they sit in the camera roll like emotional paperwork. You have the receipts, but still feel like you are preparing for something to go wrong. You have proof, but proof is not the same as peace. That is the tension. Millennials document everything because documentation is useful. But the more useful it becomes, the more life can start to feel like something that must be defended, captured, verified, and stored. And maybe that is part of why the fantasy of simplicity is so powerful. Maybe the dream is not a life with no photos, no screenshots, and no records. Maybe the dream is a life where you do not need so many of them. A world where the refund just happens, the plan is clear, the policy does not change without warning, the message does not disappear, the company remembers correctly, the app does not hide the thing you need, the moment can simply happen without becoming content, evidence, backup documentation, or a future argument you're already preparing for. That is not the world millennials got. So, somewhere, a millennial takes a screenshot, not of something beautiful, not of something historic, just a confirmation number, a delivery window, a message that seems important, a receipt they might need later. Then they put the phone down and try to return to the life in front of them. The screenshot will probably disappear into a camera roll with thousands of other images. But for a second, it does something. It makes the unstable world feel slightly more held. It gives the person a record, a backup, a tiny piece of control, and maybe that is the strange truth of millennial documentation. They are not trying to preserve everything because every moment is precious. They are trying to preserve enough to feel safe moving through a world that keeps asking them for proof.